it kind of act like old wood.
What are you talking about, torrefied?
It's torrefied wood is put in an oven, and what they do to it is I guess they started this in like Scandinavia, where they're trying to treat wood, and they drive all the moisture out of it, and so basically they put it in a vacuum chamber, they heat it up to 400 degrees, which is above the flash point of wood, but because there's no air in there, it doesn't combust.
They compress it, don't they?
What?
They compress it, don't they?
I don't know if it compresses so much, but it hardens all of the resins and everything in the wood. But in the so it's more like aged wood. But the problem with it, you know, I built a guitar for a guy, and it was actually his wood, and it was torrefied. It's brittle.
I got a sample chunk of like bracewood, and I cut it up into braces and threw it all out. Because you could take it and it would just brittle as hell.
So, you know, the jury's out on that. It's just, you know, another thing about, you know, guitar building is that I think after a while tops wear out. They're not like a violin there's like a structure to them. But I remember reading about Torres guitars, and they say, you know, there's still examples that are like artifacts, but they don't sound anything like they would have sounded when they were new. And I just think, you know, a lot of people that buy these vintage Martins from the 20s and 30s often have to take them back to Martin and have them retopped because the tops are all full of cracks. And so, all right, let me get away from the tops for a minute. Back and sides, so I want to finish up with that. Kind of jumping around. So I just want to show you what I've been experimenting with and what I have some experience with. This is black cherry, and it makes a really good guitar. Now Martin has made cherry guitars with cherry necks. I think it has a little bit of a tone quality that's a little similar to mahogany. So I would put it up there on the top of the spectrum. I showed you my black locust guitar. This is ambrosia maple, and it's got these things where it's not spalted. A lot of times people look at this and they'll say, oh, that's rotten wood. Well, it's not rotten wood, it's just stayed. You don't build instruments out of wood that's spalted because it's just not structurally strong. But this, a lot of times, this kind of maple is actually soft maple. Now there's a bunch of different kinds of maple. There's sugar maple, which is hard maple. And then there's soft maple, like red maple, silver maple. And out west we have big leaf maple, where a lot of times archtop guitars are made out of that kind of thing. Now this guitar is a guitar that I've donated to Clearwater, and I wanted to use only woods that were in the Hudson River watershed, because that's what the Clearwater is all about. It's an old sloop that Pete Seeger built to go up and down the Hudson and teach about pollution and cleaning the river up. So I wanted to use only woods that grew in. So I made this, that's walnut, this is Adirondack, this is white oak, but it's curly white oak. And this is another thing I'm looking for guitar wood, is you can have woods that are domestic woods that are really like exotics. You know, it's just like birdseye curly.
What's the heel cap?
What?
What's the heel cap?
The heel cap is wood that came off the boat.
Okay.
They did repairs on the boat. See where I stuck my piece. They did repairs on the boat, and when they were doing repairs on the boat, I asked them, and I grabbed a whole bunch of the wood. Now this is a plank off the outside of the boat. And if you know anything about boat building, these are bungs, so you can't have knots in a boat because the knots will fall out and you got a hole. So every time you have a knot, you drill it out from both sides. You drill halfway in from one side, and then you drill not an overlap, kind of an overlapping hole. You glue a bung in from one side and a bung in from the other side because they're overlapping. It can't fall out. So anyway, this is white oak, and because of having pieces of iron next to it, it ebonized. And if you've ever known about that, now if you did use, I've seen luthiers in Europe use wood and ebonize it, and it's a solution with iron and white vinegar, and you put it on the wood and it darkens it. And it happens naturally sometimes. The cool thing about this wood, I'll show you another piece, is that when I was resawing this wood, I hit a nail, and the nail, being in the wood, ebonized the wood, made these dark streaks in it. So it gave it a little bit more color. This is another piece of black locust that actually came out of the same big piece. I don't know a whole lot about this one. This is cobalt, and I've heard it referred to as poor man's swamp ash. They use it, can use it in electric guitar.
What is it?
Catalpa.
Catalpa.
Oh, Catalpa.
Yeah. But it's kind of got a nice, almost red oak look to it.
Does that stay?
What?
Does that color stay?
Yes.
Or when it's,
Yeah.
it's finished, it'll stay
Yeah.
that color?
What else do I have here? This is some real old cherry that came from upstate New York, where I grew up. This piece of wood's probably like 75 years old. And this is the Osage orange, which I've talked about quite a bit. Sometimes now, you know, I am, we have the emerald ash borers that's killing all the ash trees off, so there's a lot of ash trees, and if, see, like this is a piece I got that I almost look like zebra wood to me, that I'm building a guitar, you know, OM. I think this is kind of going to be a J45, but you can see there's a lot of figure to it, and it's just a difference. But that's white ash, which is just, you know, what they make baseball bats of. Yeah.
Are you cutting your own veneers?
Well, you know, I try to find the wood, you know, I cut it on my bandsaw,
Yeah,
but I have a resaw bandsaw.
okay, so you got a big wide.
Yeah, I have a 1-inch wide carbide blade.
Okay.
So I went through a lot of,
What, you got 3 teeth per inch?
I think mine is 5.
5.
Yeah. You know, you can use something like a wood slicer. Wood slicers are really good blades, but the problem is that they go along and then they just die. When they die, they go, you know,
Start to go.
yeah,
But they're a lot cheaper than carbide.
right. They would, the wood slicer blades, actually, those blades are a Japanese blade, and they were designed to cut chicken.
Chicken.
Go figure. And because of the chicken being soft and wet, they wouldn't heat up. But that's why when they heat up, and if you're in the middle of the cut, then you lose your piece. All right, what else do we have here? Well, I talked a little bit about sycamore. There's a guy down south I've been in touch with who made a locust guitar with a sycamore top, which, you know, some of these woods, you know, like Barry, we were talking about, why could he makes ukuleles out of walnut and has walnut tops? Why couldn't you make, you know, if they make guitars with mahogany tops, why couldn't you use walnut or, you know, sycamore or something like that for a top too? You know, walnut is one of my favorite woods, and it's used a lot. I know George Loudon's guitars, he makes, uses walnut. Right now, that there's one of the, I think it's a J35, it's made by Gibson, it's all made out of walnut, even a walnut fingerboard. So. And this is another thing, Gibson has been experimenting with kind of like different kinds of finishes that are more benign than like a lacquer finish. It's just, you know, if you're in business and you put a, you know, not a lacquer finish on it, people are going to want to buy it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you're doing it for yourself, you have a lot more options. All right, let's see how much time we have left, and I guess I'm ready to take questions. We've got 6 minutes, and then I've got to clear out. Yeah.
How much consideration do you give to the kind of vibration and sound you're going to get out of your back and side? The reason I ask, we went to a seminar yesterday and they were saying you're only going to get 12 to 15% of the sound out of your side. Is it mostly cosmetic in your case, Bill?
Well, you know, the woods that I kind of like strive to get are kind of ones that are comparable to ones we already used. There was one guy that I was talking to out there who's a professional musician, and he makes guitars, and I said to him, like, if the back and sides are only 10%, but he said 10% is a lot. You will hear it. And I do think when you build a guitar, you know, I'm kind of like on this kind of spectrum. When you build a guitar for somebody or for yourself, you want to have an idea of what kind of music you want to play on. And one of the things I kind of sussed out in my own head is like, okay, you play bluegrass, you're like strumming chords, you want it to ring for a long time, you want sustain. Where if you're playing jazz, you're playing notes really quick, a lot of them, and you want them to jump out there and decay. You don't want them to like sustain for a long time. And with jazz, you also want more of a bright sound. So just by logic, why did they build all these arch guitars out of maple? Because they wanted that crisp. On the other hand, you know, a more middle of the road sound, I think, okay, I really like mahogany guitars. I like sapele guitars. One of my own personal guitars that I bought for myself is a Parlor 12 fret neck, but it's all made out of sapele. It's got a sapele top. But I like that kind of like mahogany, bluesy kind of guitar sound. So again, you know, somebody was asking me about a new bracing pattern, Taylor's new bracing pattern. I kind of like, to my mind, if I like a certain kind of music, I like to think that you probably want to use the same kind of instrument. You know, if you like Doc Watson music and you're trying to play that kind of music, then it would make sense that it would play it on a Martin or a Gibson or whatever you use. If you like the sound of the Telecaster, you would assume that you want to play it on a Telecaster. One interesting thing that, you know, people have these little nuggets of truth that jump out is Joe Viette was doing a presentation on his guitars, and he said, cover bands don't buy my guitars. And the thing that he explained is like, people that buy my guitars want a sound that's different. They want their own sound. They're not trying to sound like Doc Watson. They're not trying to sound like, you know, Tony Rice or any of those people. They're trying to make their own sound. So they would go with more of an experimental kind of instrument. So that's kind of my thinking on that. I've got to make way for Brian, but you had a question, I'm sorry.
Just a quick one about ebonizing. Does that affect how the wood reacts? Does it affect anything about tone or
it shouldn't
Realness and
react
like
to
that.
the tone. They do it a lot. I know I've seen it in Europe where a guy had an ebony fingerboard, or not an ebony, locust fingerboard, and he treated it. The only, and I've experimented with that, but the problem is it sits on the surface. So they made it, I thought about it doing myself, that you do it for a customer, and they dig the strings into the fingerboard, they're going to, it's not gonna really stay. I did a mad science experiment where I did some vacuum, I put stuff in a solution and pulled a vacuum on it to try to drive it into the wood. Didn't go in very far. But they do pressure drying on wood. But there's other things they do, like oak. Another thing you can do is something called fuming, which they expose it to.
Oh,
Yeah,
It'll kill you too.
yeah, well, they got the idea because his boards and horse barns were brown, oak boards, and they realized it was from the horse piss that made the boards turn brown. Al Caruth, I don't know, he's from New England, has done some experimentation. But he's also done it with just plain old ammonia. You just don't get the penetration as if you use the high test. Yeah, the bag. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming.